Good evening, and this is, welcome to the Beaumont City Council closed session for March 13th, 2025. I'll call this meeting to order at 5:01. Can you have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Fenn?
Here.
Councilmember Martinez?
Here.
Councilmember White? He's in the building. Mayor Pro Tem Voigt?
Here.
Mayor Lara?
Here. In regards to public comments, this meeting will be open to the public and conducted in a virtual format to be inclusive of all participation preferences. Public comment participation is encouraged by emailing any comments to the city clerk's office or by calling in using the number provided at the front of the agenda. Nicole, do we have any public comments?
I have no written requests. Mia, do we have any callers on the line?
No callers.
Mr. Patterson, can you please read the items for discussion?
The closed session agenda consists of a conference with legal counsel regarding potential initiation of litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D4, two potential cases. One of the cases is a letter received from KUKAK.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'll adjourn to closed session. All right. And welcome to the workshop for City Council this evening for March 13th. I'll call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. Can you please report out of closed session?
Yes. A closed session, conference with legal counsel regarding potential initiation of litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4, two potential cases. And on each of those two potential cases, there was no reportable action.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patterson. That brings us to our public comment period. Any one person may address City Council on any matter pertaining to this agenda. There is a 3-minute time limit on public comments. There will be no sharing or passing of time to another person. State law prohibits the City Council from discussing or taking actions brought up by your comments. This meeting will be open to the public and conducted in a virtual format to be inclusive of all participation preferences. Public comment participation is encouraged by emailing any comments to the City Clerk's office or by calling in using the phone number provided at the front of the agenda. Anyone in person wishing to speak can do so by filling out a form at the back of the room and handing it to a staff member. Nicole, do we have any public comments?
I have no written requests. Mia, do we have any callers on the line?
No callers.
Okay, that brings us to action items. D1, Planet 2024-0068 Zoning Code Update Workshop. Number 3, Capital Improvement Project CDE-04. Ms. Carol Kendrick to do the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Happy to be here to introduce the work study for the zoning code update. I'm just going to touch on how this is consistent with the goals and policies for the city, as the zoning code consultant has prepared a comprehensive PowerPoint that they will be presenting. So I just wanted to bring to your attention that the zoning code update is consistent with the 2024 Strategic Plan Target 3, Economic Development in Downtown. It's Priority Level 3, Goal 6, to revisit the city's municipal code and zoning, and that it is consistent with the General Plan Policy DAP 1 to modify the zoning map and zoning standards to maintain consistency with the general plan, and EDF 21 that requests an update to the zoning code to reflect modern business uses and needs, including allowable flexible or shared workspaces, streamlined permitting and procedures, attract desired businesses and service, ensure tourism-related enterprises are allowed in appropriate locations, allow the pairing of uses that support business spin-offs, for example, research and development with retail, and encourage experiential retail concepts that mix service uses with traditional retail so that retailers remain competitive in an increasingly online marketplace. Before I introduce our consultants, I do want to let you know that we do have Public Works, we have Building, Fire, all of the planning staff and economic development here to answer any questions after the presentation. So at this time, I'd like to...
Give me one second. Nicole, can we have roll call, please? I missed that. My fault.
Sure. Councilmember Fenn?
Here.
Councilmember Martinez?
Here.
Councilmember White?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Voigt?
Here.
Mayor Lara?
Here. Thanks, Carol.
So we have Lisa Weiss Consulting that has been working on this project for us, and our project team is Stefano Riccici, Jen Murillo, and Abby Weiser. So I will turn it over to Stefano at this time.
Great, thank you, Carol. Let me go ahead and share my screen so you all can see the presentation. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. We are happy to be here for the third study session for this project, and this is the city's comprehensive zoning code update. You may recall we last spoke in July in front of council. It was a joint meeting, so we're happy to be back. There's been a lot of work done since then. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get started on the presentation here. As Carol mentioned, there are many people working on this project, including herself, various other planners there at the city, Melody Arachiga, Jillian Fountain, and Katie Jensen. My name is Stefano Rikiki. I'm the project manager on the Lisa Wise consulting side. We're the consultant for this project. And as Carol mentioned, I'm joined and supported by Jen Murillo and Abby Weiser. So many people are working on this collaboratively. So for tonight's agenda, I'm going to give a presentation. We'll talk about the project background and overview, and then really talk more specifically about the public review draft zoning code. That's a part of your packet, the zoning map as well, and then we'll talk next steps. But really tonight we want to hear from you all and any members of the public, of the council and the public, on just any comments or questions you may have on the zoning code. And we'll wrap up. So in terms of where we've been, this project kicked off in January 2024, and we got started right away in our analysis of the zoning code. So we did prepare a public review, well, an admin draft and then a public review draft recommendations report, which I believe is also part of your packet. And that really helped inform the code drafting that we later on engaged in. So we did have that, as I alluded to, that study session back in July of last year. That was a joint study session with you all, with the City Council and the Planning Commission. And then we got into drafting, and up until the public review period, which started last month at the Planning Commission study session that we held. Obviously today is that third study session, as I mentioned. And what we'll do after tonight is we'll want to receive comments from the City Council, and the city staff will ultimately consolidate all the comments received for us, for Lisa Wise Consulting, to prepare what is the public hearing draft. So that's the next draft, as you can see there on the slide. And that draft is what we're going to take to hearings with you all and the Planning Commission, get their recommendation before taking it to you. So, you know, we're getting toward the end of our public review period, but then after that, we'll want to go to hearings with you all and hopefully get this zoning code adopted here in the spring. So there are many project objectives. One of the things we wanted to do, of course, and as Carol mentioned, is modernize the zoning code and just make it easier for everyone to use, right? So that's both for the public and for city staff to be able to administer. As is common for zoning code projects, this comes on the heels of the new general plan, the 2040 general plan. And so what we're doing through this zoning code effort is implementing the general plan and a few other policy documents that I'll mention. We also wanted to streamline the code to be better organized. That kind of ties in with the first project objective as well. And then this last one is very important to us. Creating particularly industrial design standards. The city already has commercial design standards in its code, in its existing code, but we wanted to create industrial standards to address aesthetic impacts and compatibility with surrounding uses. We understand that this is an issue in the Inland Empire, right, and in the city of Beaumont as well. So that's what we did. As I mentioned, back in July, we had that first joint study session with the Council and Planning Commission, and we made various recommendations regarding code organization. So we wanted to remove, consolidate, or reorganize sections as needed. Zoning districts, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but we created some overlays for consistency with the general plan. In terms of use regulations, we wanted to consolidate redundant uses. And then the development and design standards, as I mentioned, particularly for industrial uses, and then also consolidate, organize, administration and procedures. So we'll talk in more detail about these recommendations that we made in July. Now we're carrying those forward and have implemented those in our draft zoning code. So as I mentioned, we looked at the general plan, did an analysis of the general plan and policies that we could hit and implement through the zoning code update. In addition to the general plan, though, we also are implementing the housing element, I guess, is part of the general plan, but the housing element is often a standalone document as well. And then also the Downtown Beaumont Revitalization Plan, the Parking Management Master Plan, and the Economic Development Strategic Plan. These are all the plans and policy documents that we looked at and that we are incorporating through this draft code that is before you today. So let's talk more about specifics. So in the public review draft code that you have in your packet, we wanted to just organize the code logically in a way that makes sense and is easy for people to follow. Update definitions and land uses. We've done that. We also removed archaic language. So the hereins and the kind of legalese, government speak, we tried to water that down a little bit just to have it more in plain English in the code to make it easier for people to understand. And then we did clarify standards and procedures. You see the example tables and graphics here. We just find that making the code more visual makes it easier, for people to understand, right, as opposed to large blocks of text. So we included tables and graphics where we could. And then, of course, we do reflect legal requirements, state law and federal law. We did a comprehensive review of the code against state and federal law. In terms of the structure, we propose to organize the zoning code in divisions. So these are the various divisions here, A, B, C, D, E. And so division A has to do with the purpose and authority of the code, how to interpret various portions of the code, and then how to measure different things within the code as well. Division B, zone regulations. These are all of the zoning districts within the city and the uses allowed, as well as the development standards for all of the zones. And we do have some supplemental standards for zones as well in Division B. Division C, citywide standards, has to do with things like landscaping, parking, general development standards, signage, specific to use, section as well. We'll talk about that in greater detail. Division D here, admin and procedures, has to do with your permitting and your permitting authorities, what your land use entitlement process looks like, other common procedures, public hearings, those kinds of things. And then Division E, definitions, includes definitions of terms, definitions of uses, and definitions of sign terms as well. So we use these divisions to help organize the code, as I mentioned. And then we do, our example here on the slide, we added a new numbering convention. We numbered in chapters, in increments of 2, for chapters. So this code will last several decades within the city. But as time goes on, I'm sure that you'll find places where you need to add things in or modify things. And so we did allow for space for that with this increments of 2 for the chapters to allow the code to breathe a little bit more if you need to add additional chapters in the future. That would make it easy to do so. And then the example on the screen there also shows the numbering string that we use for the code. So it's Title 17. In this example, Division A, Chapter 2, and Section 030. That's the section on purpose there. So that's how we number the code. That's an example there. So this slide kind of mirrors what you all may have received in terms of that key changes memo that I believe was circulated. So these are really things to hone in and focus in on in terms of important proposed changes to the code. So as I mentioned, we did create new industrial standards, which we'll talk about in greater detail. We updated the parking standards consistent with best practices, as well as the parking management master plan, as I mentioned. Added specific to use standards, so we'll talk about those. We did also propose a tree preservation section, and then we did create a couple new permit types and consolidated some permit types as well. And then the last bullet there, we'll talk about, that has to do with the zoning map. Everything else on here is the code, but for the zoning map specifically, we created a couple of overlays that we'll discuss in greater detail here. So talking about the new industrial design standards, we created standards related to the building entrance orientation, facade design. So one of the things we wanted to do oftentimes industrial uses or warehouses come in and they're just kind of these big blank boxes, right? So we wanted to prevent continuous planes, add some transparency requirements to break it up, make it a little more visually interesting for these industrial uses. So to that point, we also have some site design and aesthetics considerations that are included in the code, as well as required open space. And then that last bullet here, we do reference the city's plus policy on land use sensitive receptors, as well as Assembly Bill 98, which some of you may be familiar with. We reference those in the code, but these design standards really go beyond the plus policy and AB 98, specifically in terms of design and aesthetics, right? So that's really what we're focused on here. Some other industrial design standards, we did include special requirements for particularly large industrial projects. So more stringent requirements for landscaping, outdoor seating, having a break area for employees, and then additional parking and loading requirements as well. And then we included this last bullet here, we included a provision to allow for interim uses for vacant industrial structures or properties. This is something that we've done in other cities, and it seems to work, seems to be successful. So in case there's a vacant industrial property, there are these interim uses here in orange that are allowed, such as farmers markets, temporary uses, and the like. So that's something that we've used in other cities as well. In terms of parking, we did propose moderate reductions to the required number of parking spaces for many uses. And so this is comparable to what's in the parking management master plan, as I mentioned. We also propose a maximum number of parking space limits in downtown as well. The general plan, there are many policies that promote walkability and more compact design, right? And so this maximum number of parking spaces is something that we've found that tends to promote those kinds of things. And then the reduction of parking stall sizes, and this came up in conversation with city staff, is it seemed like some of those parking stall sizes were just too large. And so we did have a little bit of a reduction in terms of the required stall size. Other items related to parking, we did propose alternative parking strategies, such as shared parking standards. So this is when two uses, say an office and a commercial, or excuse me, and a restaurant are near one another. They have different peak demand times. And so for an office, during the day, in the morning, in the afternoon, an office may be busier, but then a restaurant may really start to pick up at around lunchtime or in the evening. So we do allow for certain parking reductions when there are complementary uses such as those that can share parking. And we also included car share spaces, electrical vehicle charging spaces, and bicycle parking, which we did receive comments on from planning commissioners, so we'll talk about that. Then otherwise, we propose to expand the transportation demand management component of the existing code. So your code already requires transportation demand management measures for commercial and industrial uses, different trip reduction measures to try to reduce the number of vehicle trips and basically have less traffic on account of that as well. So you already have that for commercial and industrial uses. In the draft code before you, we propose, TDM measures requiring a TDM plan for larger residential projects of 20 units or more. So that's another proposed change here in the code. In terms of specific to use standards, it's basically what it sounds like. These are standards specific to particular uses. So I'm sure you're familiar with accessory dwelling units, right? Those have their own section, as well as alcohol serving and restaurant uses. Particularly, we added provisions related to outdoor dining, which has become very popular at least since COVID. And then we added standards for drive-through facilities and home occupations. And we do understand that home occupations have been a recent topic with the council as well. And so we understand that there may be additional edits that we may have to make given recent discussions at the city regarding home occupations. Then we also added standards for temporary uses and 2-unit developments. 2-unit developments, you may have heard of SB 9. And so that's part of SB 9 is the 2-unit development. So we have different standards for particular uses in the code as well. Getting a little bit more specific, for drive-through facilities, we added standards regarding drive-through aisles and landscaping, pedestrian walkways, but also a 1,000-foot separation between drive-through facilities, particularly for fast food uses. So some cities want to prevent the overconcentration, if you will, of drive-throughs for fast food restaurants, and so that's why we added that in. Similarly, for gas and service stations in downtown, we added a 1,000-foot separation requirement as well as other standards regarding landscaping, lighting, and setbacks for the pump islands there. As I mentioned, in the draft code, we do also propose a tree preservation section. And so the intent of this is to protect more mature, more established trees just for reasons of beauty and aesthetics, basically. And this is something that is required in other cities as well. There are particular findings that are made for removal of a tree and for issuance of a proposed tree removal permit. Then there are also exemptions as well. So if a tree is hazardous to life or property, if it's a dead tree, or if it's a younger, smaller tree with a diameter at breast height of less than 12 inches, we're not so much worried as those as older, more mature trees. Sorry. Okay, there we go. In terms of administration and procedures, we did create a minor use permit. So as Carol mentioned, this is part of the streamlining that we are hoping to accomplish through this zoning code update. The minor use permit, as opposed to a conditional use permit, doesn't go to planning commission and can be approved at the director level, but still with some conditions of approval that the director can impose. And similarly, a temporary use permit also doesn't require a public hearing or require going to planning commission as proposed. It's the director that can issue a temporary use permit as well. And then we did propose to consolidate the plot plans. Your existing code has 3 plot plans. We propose to consolidate the administrative plot plan into the minor plot plan, just to simplify things and not have so many permit types when we thought they could be the intent of the permits could be accomplished just with the minor plot plan, which goes to the director and can be approved at the director level, and then the major plot plan, which does require planning commission approval. And then we talked about the structure and organization earlier. We did propose a consistent structure throughout all of the divisions of the proposed zoning code. We're getting closer to the end here too, so I appreciate you bearing with me. We have a few more slides. The zoning map, till now we've talked about the zoning code. The zoning map, we did create a downtown single-family residential and traditional neighborhood residential overlays. And these overlays we propose for consistency with the general plan. So the general plan land use designations there in downtown for these zones does allow for higher density. And so that's why we created these overlays there. And then for the city's zoning map, we did create this inset, and that's to be able to just zoom in and more clearly see the overlays that are, I think all the overlays are in downtown basically. And so that's to be able to see that more easily. We did, as I mentioned, go to the Planning Commission a month ago to discuss the public review draft. We received several comments. There were questions about whether the proposed zoning code met its goals, guides downtown in the right direction, whether it'll be easy to amend in the future, whether it captures the residential objective design standards. So staff answered yes to all of those questions. There were also additional questions, that we received as to whether the state restrictions during the drought for landscaping were repealed, whether to enforce or remove provisions requiring shade trees for single-family residences. Similarly, the question we received from a planning commissioner was whether to enforce or remove that tree preservation section that we discussed earlier. and then other considerations about prohibiting flammable materials for fences and a few other items. Specifically here for bicycle parking spaces, there were comments about making sure that the spaces and locks were appropriate for electric bikes as well, which we do cover in the code, but we can look at that as well. So next steps here. The public review period, as I mentioned, or I don't know if I mentioned, but we are in the public review period. And on Monday is when the public review period is anticipated to close. So that's March 17th. During this last month, during this time, staff has made themselves available on Monday afternoons to talk with any interested member of the public about the zoning code, any questions that they may have or any comments that the public may have. Staff has been available for that on Mondays. And then, as I mentioned, looking forward, we are looking to receive comments from you all and then ultimately take this proposed zoning code for adoption later in the spring. And that's all I had. So with that, thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to Carol. And I will try to stop sharing my screen. Okay.
So at this time, staff would just encourage you to provide comments, or if you've got any questions for us, again, we do have several staff members here to assist you, as well as our consultant team.
Nicole, do we have any public comments on this item?
I have no written requests. Mia, do we have any callers on the line?
No callers.
Okay, I'll open it up for council discussion. Councilmember Finn?
Yes, thank you. Couple minor questions and then one a little bit more detailed. First one is on the tree preservation, where a permit is needed. I can think of different types of vacant land, one that may be a large area that a developer wants to come in and do a lot of grading work, and there could be many trees there, versus maybe an infill lot that's in downtown that might have a big old, eucalyptus tree or something in that way. Is the process relatively simple? What I would want to make sure that is the permit's possible to get so it doesn't render a piece of land not buildable because there's a tree there. But at the same time, it'd be disappointing to see a big tree come down. But in order to get that permit, is there an alternative where maybe somebody could plant some smaller trees to make up for what's been taken out? And just want to get a general behind the scenes on that.
We can certainly draft the code to address those issues. So what staff has been experiencing, and the council may be aware, is we had a project that was recently approved, and a very large oak tree was removed. And so we don't have any kind of tree preservation. So this is our chance to try and establish it and actually protect trees that need protection. But if there are parameters that the council would like to add into the code, we're certainly open to doing that and making sure that it's easy to move forward for, these smaller projects. But taking into account that larger vacant properties are going to have, required removal. But I mean, it could be, depending on what the arborists say, is maybe these large projects is relocating the trees somewhere else. I mean, if they're healthy and can be relocated, that's something else we can look at.
And then would that apply, and this kind of leads into the next question. So I was thinking about the project at Oak Valley Parkway and Beaumont Avenue, where we're expecting multiple fast food and a car wash and so forth, where there's some great big eucalyptus trees there. And I'm looking at those, I'm like, not all of those are going to stay, obviously, because there's going to be driveways put in and so forth. So if something's been entitled already, then that's kind of grandfathered in and wouldn't apply for this?
That is correct. So
Okay.
they would have had to been conditioned to either, address those trees at that time, but because they are entitled, they are grandfathered in.
Okay, so then that then wouldn't apply to the 1,000-foot driveway for fast food for that project
Correct.
either? Okay.
Correct.
But anything from that point of when it's adopted going forward?
Right. So the entitlements, they have their own conditions of approval to follow, so that's what they would comply with.
Okay, and then a project that's in process, at what point if somebody's maybe in that project could be subject to the new rule, at what point or how far along would they be in there to where, or does staff say, hey, we just passed this, I'm letting you know, you're working on getting entitled, here's our new rules, are we going to be proactive with somebody who's in process?
So typically, once a project comes in, it locks in it to the code that it is at the time that it is submitted.
Okay, the date of submission, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then last one is in reference to our zoning designations. As a real estate broker, I like it really simple. Like residential, then multifamily, then industrial, commercial, and retail, an office space. But I know we have more than that. And I also know that when you look at different cities and different counties, it's very different. And it can be quite confusing. So I had a recent example where somebody asked about a vacant lot, so I picked up the phone and called planning and got a very quick answer, which was very helpful. But my main question is does the assignments that we have for zoning, is that compatible with the county, and is there a certain like format that we need to have with that so then the county can label it properly? Like, for example, I'm just not knowing the numbers. If we, let's say, had 15 categories and the county uses 5, do we mesh with that easily? So, for example, when a real estate agent is, or even developers looking at property, they see very generic types of zoning, and it doesn't always answer their question, and they have to dig further.
Every jurisdiction is different. I've worked for the county and another jurisdiction before I came here, and every jurisdiction has different acronyms to describe their zoning districts, and you can have a mixed bag. So, I mean, the best thing to do is to always, check with staff. I know the county has a robust land information system that our staff utilize when we're trying to determine zoning in the county, when we're doing our staff reports, trying to identify adjacent zoning. But I mean, staff is always available. We also have our zoning map online, so we try to put that information out there. But like I said, we're available. Zoning questions are the easiest ones, so
Okay.
we welcome them.
All right, and then would it make sense with that mapping, or maybe have a hyperlink to something else to say if it's zoned downtown, a little explanation of what that means? Is that an easy add, or is that difficult?
Well, what we have on our website is we have our zoning map, and it has the table that indicates what that zone is. And then we have hyperlinks to our standard zoning, our downtown zoning, and our overlay zoning. So someone could pull that up, and it lists the uses, but if the description of them is not, it's embedded in the code when you start looking at the language and the development standards. So we could put together a list of the descriptions of each zoning code and put that under our zoning table, so that's a little bit more clear instead of trying to dig through the zoning code.
That'd be helpful. Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Martinez?
Yeah, a couple to start, and then I might come back again. So just recently, in reference to the planning commissioner's comment on the shade tree provision, where the commissioner asked whether to enforce or remove that provision, my question to you is, as we move more towards like desert themes for drought purposes and so forth, it seems like the shade tree is a little bit outdated on that type of a conformity. So can you comment on why we still require that, and if we were to move or remove or modify that provision, what could be the consequences?
So typically for residential, we do require 2 trees. It's 1 on-site tree and then 1 street tree. I know that we've, in the past couple of years, the council has approved a specific plan amendment for 4 seasons that provides language that provides the residents their options to only have 1 tree. It is something that we get approached by in the planning department regarding, trying to remove a tree, and we get a lot of questions from HOAs as well. It does seem to be problematic. I mean, they do, sometimes these street trees do kind of tear up sidewalks and damage, utilities and things of that nature. We're certainly open to that. I mean, it's always nice to have kind of a tree-lined street, but again, with kind of the nature that we're in, and, with, flammable materials, and then again, property maintenance and things of that nature. I know code is constantly, going out and trying to get people to maintain their street trees, which per the code is their responsibility and not the city's.
And that's one of the reasons I brought it up, because a lot of my complaints that I hear are the neighbors in my yard and the trees over here, and it's a lot of upkeep on a tree. And to require a minimum of two trees at least is, to me, I think outdated. So I'm open to removing that provision. I'll let council think about that as we go, but I think it's a little bit too governing to require such things. So that's my comment on that.
Do you know where that's at?
Excuse me.
Do you
Oh,
have-
yes, that's, what provision did he put that on? Let me see. Do you have that, Carol? What provision of the code?
We do have it. It's section 17C 04040 A3.
Thank you.
So we'll track that.
And then my next question is on the TDM, on the presentation. I noticed, of course, I understand the goal there, but just explain to me a little bit more of what it's trying to do in the large residential project, because it shows parking as a low priority in a large residential project. And I don't know exactly what that means. Because if you look at that inverted triangle, parking's on the bottom, low priority, and it says for large residential projects. So I just want to clarify what that means.
Carol, I can take this one if you'd like.
Yes, please, Stefano.
Sure. So there are several ideas behind transportation demand management. One of them is to promote alternative forms of transportation, particularly for environmental or pollution concerns. Another reason for it is to reduce congestion, right? If you have fewer people driving, basically, as part of a large residential project, those are fewer cars on the road. That's going to result in slightly less traffic. So the idea is, if you have several projects like this and you implement different transportation demand management measures, that you'll have an appreciable fewer amount of cars on the road as well. So that's kind of the idea behind TDM there.
So is it that we're asking the large projects coming in to reduce the footprint of parking in their projects?
No, so those are kind of that
Guideline.
inverted triangle shows a prioritization. So of course we're still going to have parking. We still require parking, but in terms of the focus or the emphasis of what TDM is trying to accomplish, it's the TDM itself does not require the parking, right? The parking is in a separate section of the code. The focus of TDM and what we were trying to convey with that graphic was that TDM is trying to get more people walking, bicycling, or taking transit, basically. But we do care about parking. We have parking requirements, right? Our number of parking spaces table. That's just in a separate part of the code, a little separate from TDM.
Okay, and then I think the last question I have for now, for section 17B, 04040, referring to the residential zoning supplemental standards concerning, 1, the lighting on garage doors, and 2, the accessory structure, 25% of lot. Just a little clarification when I read that. So are we saying that all garage doors are supposed to be illuminated with lighting? And then that was my first question on that. I'll stop there. I don't know who wants to answer that one. Just when I read it, it looked like every garage door has to have lights on it. So I just want to know if that's the intention of what it's supposed to be written.
So, Carol, I believe these are from the existing design or the existing standards that the city has, but I could be wrong. I'm sorry, what was that
It's
section again?
17B 04040. I'm just trying to get some of the reasoning behind what we're going with that, because these were set up. back in
Yeah,
the
so-
day,
Right. So thank you. So I've got it here. So that particular provision is just basically a cross-reference to the city's lighting requirements. So we just wanted to, when a residential project comes in, We just wanted applicants to know, hey, there are lighting standards that you are subject to as well. And so that's a cross-reference there, just to make people aware that there are lighting standards.
So we're not saying that it's people that don't have lights are out of compliance. These are for new projects coming in.
Right. So, and then the section that it references, 17C02050, actually is another cross-reference because the city already has standards on the books in Chapter 8. So outside of the zoning code, Chapter 8.50 is the outdoor lighting ordinance that the city has. So it's just making people aware that there are standards for lighting. I don't know what's exactly in that Chapter 8.50, but maybe Jen or Carol can just talk about that.
I'm just trying to make sure that, there's a lot of doors that don't have lights, so I just want to make sure we're not creating more of an issue by saying that we're requiring lights. That's why I just wanted it defined or
It would only apply to new projects coming in after the adoption.
And then the last question there is the accessory structures have a maximum of 25% of their lot size. So I know we probably frown for density reasons of having a whole backyard be a shed or a garage or whatever, but a lot of these lot sizes are pretty small. So when you're looking at 25% of a lot size maximum of some sort of accessory structure, I'm wondering if that's practical. So can you comment on whether I'm defining accessory structure incorrectly, or if there's a reason why that 25% is there?
Well, typically it's to keep the lot coverage under control. So when you have, your primary structure and potentially an accessory structure, but that's only accessory structures that would be required to get a building permit. So anything under 120 square feet doesn't need a building permit, and ADUs would not be subject to this lot coverage requirement. So that would not prevent any of these smaller lots from being able to obtain an accessory dwelling unit.
But if they wanted a unit that was bigger than 25% of their lot, then they would be out of compliance, right? And they wouldn't be able to get a permit?
If it's an ADU, it doesn't have to comply.
Right, if an ADU doesn't apply, but I'm talking about another, garage or storage.
Yeah, it would need to comply. And that's currently in the code. But we can look at modifying that if that's the council's desire.
And I just bring these things up to council because I see so much change going on, and I really am not one for making residents have to comply with something if it's, everyone has different needs, and I want to make sure without making our neighborhoods look all, that we have some sort of conformity, but on the other hand, I want to make sure residents have that ability to, if they have something that they're doing and they need extra, space in their garage and they prefer a shed in the back instead of grass, then, why wouldn't they have that ability? And those are the reasons I bring it up to my colleagues here just for discussion. So I'll start with that for now. Thank you.
Councilmember White?
Yeah, most of it sounds okay to me. I'm a little concerned with the 1,000-foot separation between drive-throughs. This would mean that we would never get a Lewis Center in Beaumont?
I'm happy to address that, Councilmember White. So that is actually a regulation that was added into our general plan. And so what our recommendation has been is to change it to should and not shall, so it provides us language. We have had projects come through that have had drive-throughs that are within that area, and we have provided justification to the Planning Commission on those. So for staff, we would like it to be should instead of shall, because typically in these larger shopping centers, including one that we're working on right now, they do have the drive-through pads all along the frontage, and they are closer. So we'd like the ability to try to look at projects as they come in and see how they function dynamically. But our recommendation would be should.
Okay, because I recognize in the actual document here that it does put the footnote next to a C, which is conditional use, so it's not already conditional use?
The drive-throughs are conditional use permits.
Okay, because I mean, if you think about it, 3,000 feet's 3 football fields. You wouldn't have Sonic and Panera, you wouldn't have In-N-Out and Raising Cane's, you wouldn't have Taco Bell and Starbucks or Starbucks and Del Taco.
Exactly. Like I said, we've made adjustments based on the general plan, and so our recommendation is, like I said, is having that option to be flexible. But we have addressed that since then, and that is our.
I know
step.
we did that on R.A. Miller's
Ari's,
site,
and
yeah.
we did it on Zendeja's and Ziggy's Coffee. So, but again, we make a justification, and again, that's in the general plan. So that might be something that it was triggered down for the consultant, but it has been problematic since the general plan was adopted. And again, we do justify it to the Planning Commission in each instance.
Well, I know that a lot of cities, I think we were one of them, benefited from all the fast food business that we got during COVID. And I think it's changed our culture that a lot of people do eat fast food a lot. So that was one of my concerns. Plus, they bring 20 an hour jobs. What is what's the term I'm looking for the night sky lighting ordinance?
It's the dark sky.
Dark sky. So here's my, is that something we can address? Because my concern is there's a number of residential streets that are just too dark. You can't, I think it's a public safety issue. And I think, that's where it may make sense to require new garages to have lights if you have to keep the streets dark. So, and I have not heard of anybody who's been a fan of this.
And that's one thing that when we are initially scoping the zoning code update, we had brought up chapter 8.50 and also the subdivision ordinance, because there are necessary changes that need to happen in both of those. But because this is a comprehensive zoning code update, it primarily deals with chapter 17. I know that staff, we do have chapter 16 identified as a future item to bring forward, again, working with public works staff. And that chapter 16 is regarding subdivisions. But chapter 8.50 is also a section of the code that we need to address and update. So if the council's direction is for us to do that, we can certainly work through the city manager and identify the staff that need to work on those updates. But for planning, we do have some issues, and we've had to take some variances to the Planning Commission to address some of the light requirements that are unable to be met based on how they're written.
So I know that when I first started hearing about these lighting, it wasn't here in Beaumont, but it was around the Palomar Observatory.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the reason. So do you know if it was a suggestion that cities have followed, or an ordinance that a county's put in, or the state has required a dark sky lighting?
It's a Mount Palomar Lighting Observatory ordinance that was adopted by the county, and I think Temecula and Murrieta have also adopted that. There are certain zones that are required. They have like an A zone and a B zone. I forget the distance on that, but it's an ordinance that they propose, they recommend, and then typically the cities will adopt it. It's for the Mount Palomar Lighting Observatory.
Right.
But I don't.
Which is in Southwest Riverside.
It's been about 30 years. You would think their telescopes could kick out the lights at this point, but and I think that's all that I had. Piqued my interest, the distance between Oak Valley and I-10. Can you explain that to me a little bit better?
That was a planning commissioner comment?
Was it?
Yes, I believe that was.
Okay, good.
And that was not, I don't believe that was brought up during the public hearing. I believe that was submitted by a planning commissioner after the fact. So I can certainly get with that commissioner and get some more background on that.
Okay.
It was it being 10 feet from the 10 freeway, any occupiable space. So I think it's, to help reduce impacts, noise impacts to, any residents, any occupied structures or tenants that would be located, close to our freeways.
A lot of cities have their affordable housing in those locations. And that was, again, I was very interested in what that was. Thank you. That's all I had, Mayor.
Okay. Okay. Going back to the trees, and as I understand, I just want to make sure I'm clear. If I have a tree on my property and I want to remove it because the maintenance is too much for me, I have to get a permit for that, or is?
So based on the code, we have an application for a tree removal permit, but it does require that you replace it. It's a free application, but it does have requirements that you identify what type of tree. There are certain types of trees that it has to be, but you are required to replace it currently.
In a different location, or does it matter?
It can be in a different location. It does need to be in the front yard. We only regulate trees in the front yard.
So I can cut down any tree in the backyard without permit?
Correct.
Okay. So, and then the other thing I want to make sure I'm clear on is some of the trees, I know some of the subdivisions are private gated. Those are in the trees, so the trees in the right-of-way along the sidewalks are required to be maintained by the property owner?
Correct.
In those areas? And in the non-gated, or does it matter? Trees in the road right-of-way are a responsibility of the property owner that abuts that section?
So it's, in the code, it's part of the responsibility of the property owner. In the gated communities, I mean, we can go back and look at what their specific plan says, because typically that's going to be in a specific plan area. It could be the HOA, or it could be the property owners.
Okay. So HOA or the private property owner, who's ever responsible for that tree in the road right-of-way, say, for example, it's pulling up a sidewalk, would be responsible for coming in order to fix the sidewalk, would have to get a permit for that tree, and then get a permit, and then replace it with a different tree in a different location?
Correct.
Okay, I think we need to look more deeply at that. It's just a little bit cumbersome, I think. I'd like to simplify that if possible.
And I can provide the council with the language that we did for Four Seasons. So it has, there are certain requirements to where you
Okay.
don't have to replace it, but it was, again, if it's causing damage to,
Right.
the yard, including the street or utilities. I mean, I have every utility in my front yard, so, it's easy for the trees to get there, but I can certainly send that out to the council.
Okay, and before I forget, when are the comments due? When's the last date for those?
So
we can
that was a question that I was going to pose to the city council. So we are still waiting from comments from some commissioners. I did remind them last night that I need them as soon as possible because they've had more time to review it than you have. So what I'd like to do is defer to the city council. I don't want to rush you. This is a large, comprehensive document, so I'd like to get feedback from you on how long you need.
Okay.
I know that the consultant needs about 3 weeks from receiving the consolidated comments from staff to kind of make all those changes. So again, I would defer to the council and see how much time you need. Like I said, we don't need to rush it. I want to get it right, and I'm sure you guys want to get it right too. So please let me know what you need.
And I appreciate the streamlining options that we've created, the minor plot plan as opposed to administrative, consistency in the language. But the difference between a major plot plan and a minor plot plan, that determination is made by the director, correct? If say, oh, I want to try to do this as a minor plot plan.
The code clearly spells out what would be a minor plot plan and what's a major. So typically we see minor plot plans are plotting and architecture, typical front yard landscaping and fencing plans for residential tracts, new construction for instance, for like a small industrial building or something of that nature would be a major plot plan. So the code does call out, so staff can determine what plot plan is appropriate, whether it's a minor plot plan or a major plot plan.
Okay. Done. On the draft zoning map, the only question or concern I had there was in the downtown area, we've gone to a reduction in the parking, half a parking space per unit. The concern, there's only one concern that I have with that, and it's in the downtown index map where we've done the classification of higher density overlay, which I think by the footnote, it's like 15 units or something to that effect. But there's areas off of what would be American, it's not called out on the map, it's one block, was it, west of Xenia? And that street's pretty narrow there, and if we increase the density, typically what's been happening with our apartment, anytime you have apartments is cars parked outside of those areas along the street. So the concern that I have is if we increase the density, add more units, and reduce the parking requirements, that street is going to have a lot of problems as far as parking goes. Is that?
That is true by definition. However, when you're increasing the density, you create more opportunities for affordable housing, which there are laws on the books that reduce the parking regardless, and they don't have to comply with our parking requirements. So that's kind of what I foresee in that is these would be more affordable type, which I believe the half space is consistent with the assembly bill that was approved for that.
So, and I understand that. So the question I guess I have is, are we allowed to, instead of going to a higher density, just go to high density? Or those aren't one and the same, right?
Well, we have, in the general plan, we have a high-density residential, so we don't have a higher density designation.
So then, okay, then am I misinterpreting the blue checkered overlay?
So no, the overlay would add more, so under the overlay, but we could, I mean, you could change the parking requirement, and if a low-income or affordable project comes in, they wouldn't have to comply with that anyways, so that way it would cover us if you do have market rate projects that are coming in those areas with the overlay for higher density.
Okay. Well, I'll defer to your recommendation. The only concern I have is I don't want somebody walking 2 blocks to their house, even though it's low income or, okay. That's all I have for right now. Other than that, I think these are good changes and it's very clear as far as the new labeling goes. Mayor Pro Tem Voigt?
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate all the comments from everybody. I too think the trees needs to be looked at a little bit further. One question I had is, I know within the map, we designate current open space or recreation area. I know the Parks Master Plan isn't out yet, but is there any room or wiggle room that's built in within that for parks? So, does that make sense what I'm asking? I'm just making sure that we have other designated areas in case it does come forward that we need more open space or more parks, that we have that at least thought out or thought about here on where that could be.
So the final draft is expected in April, and
This will be done before then.
no, this will come after. So my recommendation is to look at the Parks Master Plan and then bleed that into.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that would be an important standard that we might need to account for with the space that we have here. I appreciate that they've referenced the other policies, the plus policy, and the other sections of the code. That was very helpful. And then I know that in the past 2 city council meetings, we've had discussion regarding 2 incidents, one of those being the 300 square foot garage. What corrections or what would be done to address those within the code as this reads now? So did we make any changes according to that, or do you need us to discuss that today?
Well, we will be proposing changes in there, but I know this is scheduled to come back to the council prior to that because we do have pending applications that applicants have been waiting for several months for resolution. So, but we'll take your direction.
Okay, I think that was along the lines of Councilmember Martinez's question regarding the garages and then the improvements that they would be required to make based off of those. I don't know if necessarily lot size and, the percentage per se falls into that, but I think it's something we probably need to discuss as to what that looks like so we can get that rolling forward and provide direction. Because I believe you wanted us to bring that here tonight, correct?
We need council to formally take action on that, and then we can put it into this.
Then we'll apply it to this. Okay,
And the only reason we're doing that is because we have pending applications.
okay, very good. Then it'll come back at a later date, and this will be updated according to that.
Correct.
And I think the last thing I had was just regarding the home businesses. I think we made changes to that on the last city council meeting, and are those reflective in here?
Yes, so we are looking at, we had changes that we discussed and that the city council discussed, and so those are being incorporated as well.
Okay, very good, because they looked a little different on here, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't comment on what was there, if they
We'll-
were
We'll make
moving
sure that
forward.
those are in there, yes.
Okay, very good. Then I have no further discussion for me.
Councilmember White?
Yeah, I want to throw in my 2 cents on the tree also. I think we need to revisit that. We have a very large tree in the front of our house, and I know it's going to start impacting our home. And we don't have a whole lot of spaces to put another tree once we take that one out. I don't know that we'd put another one back right where we're having problems. I thought I had stayed away from an HOA, but, and then I just want to make sure the comments that we have made tonight, we don't need to put those down. You're going to keep track of those comments, correct?
We will be keeping track of those. We'll go back and watch and document that clearly. And again, I'm sure the consultant is taking copious notes as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, we will present we will prepare a summary of this meeting, and that'll be public.
Any additional comments from council? We can leave the tree thing alone? See what I did there?
Excellent.
We good?
Now I see why not everyone goes and gets the permits when they're supposed to.
I know, I was thinking that too. Is there anything that staff wanted us to look at specifically? I mean, I don't know, sometimes I think you guys are the experts, and I may be speaking out of turn here, but if there are specific things within the code that you would like us to review, I think this is a perfect time to bring it up.
So I can tell you, all of the planning staff went through every single page. It took us a long time. It is a dry read, even for planners who, I live for this. But what my recommendation would be to you is there are some things that each one of you are passionate about, and I would focus on that. Based on going to council meetings and planning commission meetings, we start realizing, we try to anticipate what kind of questions you ask or things that you're passionate about. I would focus on those, please, because those are things that you're going to be looking at in the future. Planning staff, like I said, we've had all four planners and our intern read this from back to front, and actually staff is going through it again just to make sure that our comments are getting in there. So that would be my recommendation, because it took us a couple months to get through it, and you don't have that time. So that would be my recommendation. If there's any questions that you have of us, our planning staff is always available. I'm available, and any of my staff are available, or just let Elizabeth know, and we are happy to assist you with any questions you have.
I have one other comment just with regards to that. Just like when we go forward with fees, we like to get the consumer. I know we're out to public comment right now. Have we reached out to our chambers, our businesses, and entities to ensure that they too have had their feedback in here, or that they know that this public comment is open? Because some of this, is associated with those organizations.
Right. So it has been posted on our website for a month, but I can't. I don't think that there's been outreach. I know we were trying to work on some social media, but again, it was trying to kind of nail down some of these meetings and determining if, we were going to have another combination meeting, and then also kind of working through some things. But we can certainly reach out to those organizations and get that information out, because we do have the public hearings that will be going forward to Planning Commission and City Council. So we can certainly take comments at that time and incorporate any changes that we receive at those hearings as well.
I think sometimes going to the people who are involved in this all the time and run into the red tape or the barriers and what they're trying to do, can help guide this as well, or at least offer the suggestions so that we can consider.
Right, the chambers, the BIA, I mean, there's definitely, we'll reach out to those organizations. I'll work with our PIO.
Great, thank
Okay.
you.
Good question. Real good. So with that, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting, our workshop at, oh, sorry.
How much time do you need?
Oh,
As it sits, right?
Yes.
I don't know, I could probably commit to 2 weeks, but that's up to you.
I think that's fair, because otherwise it'll drag on.
Yeah.
So you want to go for the 31st, or?
I think your mic's got
I know you did what I thought.
It's going to cut into nap time, definitely. but
You can read it off
The
the
third-
Stairmaster.
You want to, 31st? Is that enough time? Or
I'm
do you?
good with whatever you guys have.
You sure?
Yeah,
I
I don't
was-
see much that I need to, make comments on, but
Is the 31st work for you?
Mayor.
that's a mistake.
No, just to get comments back into playing. If, in case you want to review it, having trouble sleeping, you want to review it and get more comments back on things you didn't maybe. 31st? Mr. Finn?
I'm good with that. If staff could send us a reminder email, perhaps, a few days before the deadline?
Absolutely. I'll put an appointment on your calendars. And,
Yeah, before you go to bed, right?
I'm reading it tonight.
All right. We're pumped right now. So does the 31st work? Does that give you enough time to do everything that you need to do as well?
yes, again, so based on that timing, once we get all the comments in, we'll consolidate those for the consultant. Like I said, it'll take them approximately 3 weeks to get that repackaged. And then we can work on getting the public hearings scheduled for Planning Commission and then eventually City Council for adoption.
Okay.
Mayor, may
Thank-
I ask for one request?
Yes.
Sorry.
No,
Is
don't.
there a way that we can get it uploaded to the Google Drive so that we can put it on our Remarkable and be able to read it through our Remarkable?
I don't know if there's a size limit, so let me ask IT.
Okay, very good, thank you.
We're good? That was a good question. We're good? Think we're all good? You have everything that you need now?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks to the consultant, I appreciate that. Thanks to staff for reading this. I know it's difficult at times, but I appreciate the work. So I will adjourn this at 7:07.
Nice healthy gavel there.
Yeah.